perhaps joining us for the first time, welcome if that's the case. We are here at Field & Main this evening. My name is Neal. We're going to taste some wine. We're going to blind taste some wine. So who's with us? I think I'm just getting some first notes that people are coming on online, so I'll wait for a few more to join us. And we'll get going. It's a red wine night, which is good. Excited to have that experience. Isabel's with us. Hi, how are you? We're gonna rely on your expertise this evening. Tran, how you doing, man? Happy Thursday indeed. Yes, it's something that we start looking forward to. I was talking with a guest who just said this is the high point of the week and looking forward to it. And like I said before, this is a high point for me too. Kathy's with us again, great. Jan's here. Perfect. As you're all getting going, does everybody have the wine in their glass already or not? Go ahead and pour yourself a glass. I want to start just a tiny bit different today. We're going to go through the typical process and kind of work our way through, but I want to leverage a little bit of the expertise that we're developing and see if something happens for us along the way. Initially, if we can start there. So, perfect. Robert Ford's with us, and Tanya is with us, I bet you. Yep. Is it Tanya or Tanya? I apologize if I'm not getting that right. Stephen, hello. The Chans are here. Drew's behind that, right? Erica and Drew are there, I'm sure. Johnny, thank you for joining us. Hey, Stephen. Sean Clancy's with us. The Swanbergs are here. Okay, great. We got a great crew. Krista's here. Oh, cool. Great. And the Grasics made it home on their motorcycle with the wine in tow, which is good. Melanie, how you doing? Crystal's with us. Perfect. All right, poured. So here's what we're going to do to start. Sean's with us this evening. That's just great. But Sean, are you drinking beer or are you drinking wine? Because that's the question. The request last week to do an IPA-based tasting. I wouldn't be able to nail that for sure. Matt and Kathleen are with us. Perfect. I'm glad to have you with us. And the Mishis are here. All right, cool. So for those of you that have been with us for a bit now, I want to just try to see what jumps out of the glass first and foremost. And we're going to just make a note for each yourselves at home and myself here. What's the first thing that when you look at this, put your nose in it, don't taste it, just put your nose in it and allow yourself to think, what is this wine? And write a note down. Your initial impressions, right? Your first thought. You know, when they say you're doing kind of a game of chance or something along those lines, your first thought is almost always the best thought because it is the one that comes from the subconscious. So what is your first thought that this wine is? You don't have to chime in and say it yet. Just write it down for yourself. And then as we go through, I want to reference back to that point. As I begin to taste, and as I've tasted more and more over time, what I'm finding is as you gain an understanding of the wine and wines in general, build up your own palate, build up your taste memory, and then have sort of a frame of reference. What your initial conclusions are oftentimes more right than not. And so as you're getting better at this, as you're getting more experienced at this, I'm trying to hopefully prompt you to begin to trust yourself. You're not always going to be right that way, but that's okay. And Krista's already thrown out there for us the Shiraz 2017. The problem with this exercise, though, and I want to put a caveat on it, is that you can get stuck on trying to prove that your initial impression is right. So the important part is just write it down and put it aside, and then we're going to work the process. But at the very least, we're going to go back to what your first initial thought was to see if it's something we should consider. Again, all you've done is looked at it and smelled it in a quickest of seconds, right? So you haven't really spent time with the wine. So let's not belabor the point, but just what's your first? I'm smelling it, I'm thinking about it, and write down a few ideas where it could be. It just gives you your first initial impression. I've taken that to be a part of my process now, and it's been super helpful. So Rick Tag is saying hi to everybody. Hi, Rick, to you, man. Welcome aboard. All right, so let's dive into what we do have in front of us. Let's work on the appearance. So what do you see? Are we talking about something that's clear or hazy? And again, clear, most red wines are not necessarily shining clear, like looking through a piece of glass, but can you see sort of your hand through it? Can you see, if you're looking at our tasting sheet, for example, as I am, can you see what you think are lines or letters or words? Can you read the whole entire page through it? If you can see something through it, it's a clear wine. It's not hazy. And if not, then it might be hazy. But in this case, you definitely can see through it, so it's clear. The clarity is clear. And then what's the intensity? And again, looking through the wine like this, sort of down at the page, if you can read the entirety of the words on the page, it's pale intensity. If you can see some outline of words or lines on a page, it's probably medium. If you can't see anything, it's deep, excuse me. And Steven's already noting that this stuff smells like the stuff he drinks, so he likes his chances today. That's great. Yeah, we've had a few in the past couple of weeks where we're just like, oh gosh, and I just completely botched last week and went against the group, and I've learned my lesson. So we will work harder this week I will work harder this week at kind of staying in line. But yeah, Tanya, right, it's fairly opaque, deep and dark and ruby color. I think that's the case. I can see a few lines through, so it's medium plus, kind of to deep. It's indicating that it's a pretty rich wine, perhaps, or at least a wine. What do you learn from the deepness of a wine, right? You learn that especially on the red side of things, that the color probably has come from the tannin extraction of a thicker skinned grape. So we're talking about particular grapes versus other grapes, right? So if it's a deeper ruby color and it has an intensity that's richer, deeper, we're looking at a varietal like Cabernet Sauvignon less than, say, something like Pinot Noir. It's just an indication. It's something to think about. So we make that note. And Diane is pointing out that the outlier can also be correct. And you're correct there too, as you were the closest in the past, talking a little bit about Southern Italian red wines last time. So we'll look for the right option, the right wine choice, but there's been some really great group work done, so I'm going to definitely weigh both as we get to the end of this. But and the Torberts are with us. Great, thank you very much for joining. Okay, so we've got a deeper intensity, medium plus, deeper intensity. It's ruby in color. All right, let's move to the nose. What does it smell like? Besides wines that you like to drink, Stephen, what do you think? What are you smelling? Let's work fruit, earth, wood. What kind of fruit are we smelling first and foremost? Are we in sort of a primary fruit character? Do you smell red fruits, citrus fruits, green fruits, stone fruits, black fruits, tropical fruits? Are the fruits dried? Are they fresh? Are they a little bit tart? Black fruit. Yeah, black fruit's coming through. A note of granite and cinnamon coming from Kimberly. Thank you. Some wood, some strawberry jam, some cooked fruit. Yeah, so jam fruit, cooked fruit. This is more of a riper profile of fruit, right? Super fruity from Tanya. Red fruit for her. Jammy. Some spice and wood. Some cedar. Plum. Here we go. We're rocking now. Grape. This grape count from Rick. Absolutely. Yeah, you can. It's a funny thing that in wine you rarely smell grape, but sometimes you do, and that's an indication sometimes of some varietals. So let's work with that. Not fresh fruit, not tart fruit, but certainly really ripe fruit into candied fruit, or perhaps more appropriately kind of cooked fruit, but a confectionery element perhaps by way of just the concentration of sugars that you get in something cooked. Rick's saying stewed. Black currant. Cool. Not fresh from Krista, thank you. Yeah, all right, so we got, is this a pretty pronounced nose? Was it easy for you to ascertain all of those different aromas, or did you have to kind of work at it? I think it was pretty easy. It's got a lot of pronounced flavor profile coming out of it. It's certainly not a light intensity of aroma. It's clean. This one is certainly, that's in my glass. So I would say it's medium to very pronounced aroma. And we're getting all that wonderful kind of cranberry for some, to black fruit, to strawberry, that's kind of jam, robust flavors. That's good. A little bit of vanilla. We heard oak earlier. Some baking spices, some stewed tomatoes, some vanilla. All those are indications, vanilla and the baking spices being more of indications of wood and of oak, which is really cool. Good. Some thyme, so an herbal note, and a woody herbal note at that. So going on the theme of your initial impressions, you had your initial thought as you first smelled it quickly and looked at it. Now, as you're going into it more deeply, what potential varietals can we be talking about? What potential places can you be talking about? John is saying via or through his interpreter, Krista, that he smells root beer, which is cool. So something herbaceous, herbal in root beer, and then kind of caramely and sugary and a little bit sweet fruit, of course, as well. Stephen Chase is getting some cedar. So varietals that could fit this bill, that are darker in color, that are deeper in intensity, and that give you a pronounced aromatic quality with a little bit of herbaceousness, definitely a wood profile, and currants to raspberry, or to strawberry rather, to dark black fruit. What varietals would we be talking about? I think we got to throw Cabernet out. I think the grapey note that was thrown out by Rick, you could throw Zinfandel in there. We could talk about a blend that would be Merlot, Cabernet Franc, some of that herbal element coming from a Cabernet varietal. Malbec, absolutely something that we could talk about. Mourvedre, we're seeing Syrah, Monastrell, Malbec again, some Cab Sauves. Yep. Yeah, as I'm giving it a minute here, right, there's some secondary aromas coming out. So let's move past fruit. Anything earthy? I'm getting so my mom, when I was a kid, like she would make split pea soup, but part of that split pea soup would be ham hocks, and the ham hocks would cook really slow to kind of make a broth. And that ham hock kind of porky goodness, smoky ham hock element is here. So there's a meatiness that's coming through right now for me on this particular wine. So there's an earthen element. There was some leather for some folks before. Candy's already thrown out New World, which is cool. So Kimberly's asking a great question with respect to how you begin to understand different varietals and what they display in terms of their tell or their markers. And you do that certainly through tasting. There's some great reference books that are out there. If you're interested in going down a rabbit hole, the Som TV, you can download that app and begin to watch. There's other tasters who are out there and they have their tells and they have their references. I think online too, didn't you, Julie, find at some point through the WSET and studying that there are flashcards that are out there per varietal, and they're sort of like, okay, we're talking about Chenin Blanc. Chenin Blanc should have a sort of a lanolin woolly element, stewed apple, bright lemon curd. There's references that you can kind of look for, and it's certainly on our docket, although we haven't gotten to it, to kind of create just sort of a cheat sheet that would list out what profiles exist for varietals. We've all wanted that and not been able to get to it just yet, but we can start to kind of formulate some of that as a group. We're doing that. And Anya, to your question about how you can participate and taste along, great question. You can do that by visiting us here at the restaurant and picking up a bottle. We sell a bottle each week that allows you to play along with the wine at home. And we have a series of them already pre-planned going forward. And so you can actually pick up a couple bottles in advance. So you can make one trip out and have 3 or 4 weeks in advance at home waiting for you, or you can come out each week and pick one up. All right, so we're going back to some great descriptors. We got damp moss, and the tannins being light, so the Swanbergs are already into the palate, which I have delayed you from tasting this wine for 14 minutes, so I'm glad you jumped in. Go ahead, by all means, taste the wine. Vanilla, anise, root beer, great descriptor from Rick, going back to the descriptor from John Walter. Tempranillo is a possibility we'll throw in there too. We had a New World vote. So let's taste this, and then we'll come back to the Old World, New World idea and see if we can verify some of these other flavor profiles that we're picking up on the nose. And Anya, yes, you can order them online, but they have to be picked up in person. We don't yet have a shipping capability. Drew's slash Erica is throwing out Mendoza right off the bat. And that's funny. That's kind of my first thought too. We've had a number of Malbecs that were thrown out by way of discretion. So if it's Mendoza, it's New World, as Matthew notes. And that's what Kathy's also saying. So we're all kind of centering down that route. But let's work our way through a series of things and definitely earmark Malbec and Argentina. Could this be Old World? And if it were, where would it come from and why? Or why not? Can we definitely say, as Stephen's just pointing out, that it's the New World? That oak profile that's on the lingering part of the experience right now on the palate is seemingly very New World. The fruit profile is really ripe and pretty New World. All that chocolate that Kimberly's noting right now. The acid levels aren't such that it's outlandishly high. They're pretty high. So let's work our way through real quick the palate and then have that help us really solidify the initial impressions that we're having that this is New World. Is it dry? I'm getting full dryness. It's got a bit of acidity. Isabel's noting if it's Old World, she thinks it's possibly Spain. I think that's a good choice. Spain, it could be a kind of a Garnacha kind of Spanish wine that would give us a little bit of that. We could reference perhaps Portugal. If you remember tasting back the Douro River, gave us a lot of ripeness, but also more of a raisiny kind of earthen element too that was underneath all the fresh fruit there. So I'm pretty comfortable being in the New World. The tannin level here is medium, would you say? Definitely dry. Tannin medium. Acid's pretty high, medium plus. How about the alcohol? Anybody getting a burn? Anybody getting kind of a retronasal experience with alcohol? Think of having a shot of a liquor. Think about just taking a shot of vodka, which I don't know why anyone would necessarily, but if you did, you'd have that retronasal kind of warm burn of alcohol. Is that here in any way? That's oftentimes for me a tell kind of the New World. You get a lot riper profile. Johnny's noting some soft tannins. Yeah, they are. These are medium tannins. They're present. They're not super grippy. They're not like stuffing cotton balls up between your lips and your gums. And Carrie, yeah, I'm with you. A slight burn. Not a crazy amount. And it's not a fault of the wine per se. I'm not trying to pick apart the wine that way. I note that as a way to say to myself, all right, so this is coming from a warmer climate. Warmer climate means potentially more ripe fruit. The riper fruit means more sugar. More sugar means higher alcohol potential. So Isabel's saying that she thinks it's a medium alcohol. And I think it has maybe medium plus. I think it's got a little bit more there, but I think it's wearing it extremely well with some fruit. And Eric is also lobbing into the mix Touriga. Yeah, I think that's kind of to my point before about the Douro Red, a Touriga coming from Portugal. And I think that we can consider that. We should potentially consider that. We also had Australian Shiraz before. We have Malbec running right now. We had California Cab running. Kathy's pointing out that she thinks it's at least 13.5. We had a higher from Jen coming out at 14.5. Yeah, I think we're comfortably between that range, no doubt about it. Rick's saying a little higher alcohol too. This wine's opening up nicely now, isn't it? Like it's got the fruit quality, but there's a secondary layer of flavor and aroma that are coming about. It's kind of nice. It's needed a minute to just kind of swirl, which is why I used up 14 minutes of our time to get to that point. Rick's looking at major legs. Yep. There's a viscosity to them. Yeah, they take a minute to get down, which is an indication of higher alcohol, especially once we've determined that this is dry. So it has a higher alcohol. Some of that's fermented out. Candy's saying she doesn't think Cab, and that's probably fair. Let's talk about Cab and from California, what would we be getting? You probably wouldn't get as much of the like the strawberry jam we got off the initial nose. You certainly wouldn't get the tartness, I think, that you're getting here. We probably get a little bit more of structure in the tannin profile. I mean, it could be an easygoing kind of broad appellation California Cabernet, but it's not as structured as Cabernet typically. Jan has a great thought about a Chilean Cab being softer, noting, as Rick does, the kind of wonderful integration of tannin that we do have on this. it is a pleasant tannin, that soft tannin. It's tannin for me oftentimes, when I experience a wine with tannin, I don't think of wanting to have a glass just to have a glass. I think about how it would apply itself to a particular pairing or dish or meal. This is a tannin that I find kind of pleasing with the relatively high acid element here and the freshness that it seems to have and the tannin quality that's with it. I could drink a glass and probably more. Erica's sharing with us her tells. When her face turns red, it has high alcohol. So, and you can develop your own tells, right? This is a personal tell for her. They say like in poker, right? Everybody has their own tell, but Erica's tell with respect to alcohol is a reddening of the face. Tanya's throwing out a whole series of thoughts here from Tannat from Argentina, or maybe Uruguay. Not as tannic as you expect. So I agree with you there. Malbec from Argentina, or perhaps a Chilean cab. And I think that's right. So we all kind of be seemingly centering ourselves more in South America. So even if we were considering, let's say, a West Coast Cabernet, the profile of this wine is sort of taking us to South America and to likely Argentina. We could consider Tannat from Uruguay, for example, or from Argentina, but Uruguay in particular, which would be an interesting wine. You can get a softer tannin profile from the Tannat from Uruguay, and that would be really cool. And Chris, you're right. You should have gotten the mole enchiladas to pair with this evening. They would have been really tasty for this. So Carmenere, can we rule out Carmenere? Stephen asks. Yeah, I think so, because of two tells that I find, and that in the last 3 times that I've tried Carmenere, more tart red fruit and a little bit more of an astringency, sort of a greenness. There are Carmeneres I've tried that have none of that, but generally speaking, in a blind tasting context, if I had gotten more stemminess, like if you chew on the stem of a grape, it has an astringency to it. It's kind of the green pepper pyrazine element. I'm not getting as much of that here. And so I would rule out Carmenere, but the place that you might find Carmenere in terms of Chile, Argentina, South America, that kind of indicator, I think that would be this case here, and Kathy's kind of backing me up, which means I'm right. So let's talk for a second about Zinfandel, because it's now popping up by way of Johnny, and we had talked about it before we leave kind of the U.S. and venture our way down south. Rick's also saying California Zin. It could be Zin. I think there's a possibility that it's Zin. It's not quite as peppery. It doesn't quite have it has a high toned acidity element that I'm not thinking as much Zin, and also referencing what we've been taught by Chris in the past, that we've already done a Zin, so why would we do another one? We did a Ridge Zin, that's not this Zin, so it could be another Zin, but we should be tasting the wine for the wine's sake. I think that it's possible. I don't think you'd have a bad guess arguing, hey, we have dark black fruit, a little bit of red fruit, we have cocoa, we definitely have oak. So we're going to talk about oak in a minute, and I think that's going to help us get past Zin, perhaps. I think the cedar element on the Zinfandel would indicate more of a French oak usage, and there are certainly Zinfandels made with French oak, but more oftentimes they're made with more of an American oak, and I'm not getting that profile. So let's talk a little bit about the wood. It's not smoky, not peppery, overly fruity Zin from California. And Chris, you were just about to write that. See? There we go. Johnny, you're not getting us through. It seems that we're still rolling. Perhaps it's you. And Brian's noting not enough alcohol for a Zin for him. So let's talk about wood and where this wood happens on the palate. Hey, Rachel, how are you? Welcome to the chat. We could use your expertise. We're tasting a wine. If you want to look through some of the comments, maybe you can help us to ascertain what you think. Or if you want to jump in and tell us what you think California Zin tastes like vis-a-vis, say, Argentinian Malbec. That's kind of where we're headed. And Jan Yezin can be smoky at some points depending on what's there. But the oak here, I'm getting most of the oak experience on the back end. I got the aroma on the back end of the smell. It wasn't initial, and I'm getting it on the back end here. And I get that in sort of a drying sensation that's on the palate. And then I also get the aromas from it and the flavor sensations. And they're more cedared, they're more spice than they are vanillin. And that would lead me, generally speaking, to French oak rather than American oak. I get a little bit more vanillin. I get a little more of that bourbon barrel, that quality, kind of that char element from American oak than I'm getting here. And I'm not getting a ton of oak. I'm just getting a presence of it. As Candy's noting, it's medium oak profile, right? It's not overwhelming. It's well integrated. I think the freshness of the fruit and the cooked quality of fruit, the jammy fruit that's here, the ripeness of this fruit is met with an appropriate kind of judicious use of oak, which is really nice. Tanya, you're picking up more vanilla with time, huh? And not time to spice, vanilla over time. And then the structure is building a little bit more as this gets a little more oxygen. And Sarah's with us now. Hey, great, Sarah, welcome. She gets blue fruit from Malbec. Any blue fruit in there? For me, no. It's more red to black, like a tart blackberry and dark red cherry, and the currant is a really good tell, I think, on this. So yeah, there's currants would lead me back to Cabernet, potentially. You can get some on Malbec too, I guess. Some of that cocoa we got before, are we still getting that on the palate? I need more wine. So does Julie. No, I'm not getting as much blue fruit. It would change just by pouring some more. I'm getting more kirsch now, kind of the flavor profile of fruit in alcohol, right? So this cherry liqueur, some blackberry liqueur, and a bit more bramble kind of blackberry on the vine. Kathy's picking up some cocoa there. And ripe plum, that's cool. Yeah, so Merlot. So plum is always a tell for me for Merlot. Maybe we're talking about like Chilean Cab that has a bit of Merlot blended in. Maybe it's a blend. And yes, Rachel, we are blind tasting. So other folks do have the wine in front of them. We are, there's probably about 60 or so folks right now with us, and they have a blind wine. I have no idea what the wine is. This is a wine Tony and Julie picked out and have put in front of us, and we're just trying to figure this out together. So we've made our way through the wine thus far. It's clear, it's medium to deep in intensity. It has sort of a ruby color to it. It's clean, and it's got a medium to a very pronounced profile. And then we're getting a lot of dark fruit, some strawberry jam, some spice, some cool stuff that way. So if you want to put those puzzle pieces together, you and Sarah, who have done this in the past without the wine. Figs coming in from Jim. Yeah, so figs is bringing me back a little bit to Zinfandel. You know, it might be there. Is it changing as much for you as it is for me? Because this is definitely a different wine than it was. We're at 28 minutes, and at 14 minutes, this is a very different wine. It's broadening. It's getting more voluminous, more voluptuous too. I don't know any more V words, so I'm going to stop there. Wow, this is a great indicator, like, for the enjoyment of wine. And if you think you understand wine, you just have to wait 15 minutes, and the wine changes for you, and it becomes something that is all the more intriguing. And sitting with the wine is absolutely something that's one of the great life's pleasures, because in 15 minutes we've just had two different experiences, or at least I have. Isabel's saying that she gets that too, and Kathy, the balsamic's a nice descriptor. It's totally different. So do we need to start over? Do we need to take a step back? Malbec still could be in the running, I think, very clearly. Zinfandel could be in the running with this particular profile at the moment. Cool. Wow, yeah. Sean, you're absolutely correct. It's definitely not an IPA. Chris, Victorians. We're at 30. This is the point at which we should come up to an answer, or we have in the past. We want to start to try to weed some stuff out. So let's do that. We'll revisit what we talked about earlier before, because we were talking about New World. So in the New World, let's deal with California Cab again. Anything that should say that we are a California Cab? I mean, it could be. It's not a Pinot Noir. Definitely not. It's not Washington State to me. It could be Zinfandel from California. It could be Uruguayan Tanat. We talked about Malbec from Argentina. There's also Shiraz from Australia that could be in here with some of those cocoa notes. That would be an interesting indicator, and that higher alcohol could certainly be some part of this. The blackcurrant, black cherry that Isabel's picking up could be Cali Cab. And Chris is going back, of course, working the circumstances more than the wine, but it's not. California Cab at this price point would be amazing. And Susan, yeah, I don't know that Shiraz is necessarily out on this profile. This is where this is a challenge, right? Because you start to look and try to suss out the differences between an Australian Shiraz, between a Malbec, between a Chilean Cabernet blend, between a California, let's even say like Central Coast Cabernet, or just a broader Appalachian California Cabernet. The balsamic notes are coming through now too. Before we get to kind of final guesses, what were your initial impressions? What did you write down? Go back to it. What did you think right off the bat? Which may not be a very good tell, because this wine changed so much as we sit with it. But what did you think initially, and did that initial conclusion line up now with where you're headed? I agree with you, Susan, that I think the acidity is a little bit higher than you'd find in Shiraz from Australia. There's kind of a nice mix here between a high acidity, so a tension of acidity, and ripeness. And Rachel, yeah, Primitivo absolutely could kind of play into this realm. That balsamic vinegar hit, the ripe fruit, the high acid, it could be Primitivo, and thus would put us in potentially the old world. But the first impressions were Shiraz, Malbec or Chilean Cab, Cali Zin, Malbec. Yeah. Johnny said he's getting some PV or Merlot. Sorry, Kristen thought PV or Merlot. GSM or Malbec. Yep. So for me, interestingly, like, but maybe this would be indicative, but I was thinking, Dolcetto or Lagrange. The nose was tart red to me, and so I was sort of in Austria and in northern Italy. And as I dug my nose in further, and as we tasted more, my initial impression wasn't where I wanted to go at all. And so I just wanted to start to train you, though, to think through things, but also to work the grid, but also to trust yourself a little bit. And so Stephen said Malbec and South America right away. Just drank a few in the last few days. So yeah, this is in your wheelhouse perhaps. And South American Malbec. I was comfortable with Malbec as we sort of got into this more. And so I think I'm going to go with Malbec this evening. Argentinian, I think 2017, 2018 maybe, but 2017, 2018. So present vintage, it's 2 to 4 years old. I think the Malbec element here would be some of that tart element, some of that ripeness, some of that structure, that softness in the tannin that was noted early on would put me there. So a Mendoza high elevation plateau in Argentina. And Tiny's going to try to mess this up real quick. Sun Italy, Portugal, Spain, is using New World techniques in oak, aiming for the Western market fruity. Yeah, I don't think you could be faulted for coming to that conclusion, per what also Rachel noted in the way of Primitivo. Same thing from that context. I've had some really lovely Primitivo that would give you this kind of profile. This is a type of wine that is New World in style, but could come from the Old World in a warmer place, and vice versa. You get a little bit of Old World element. We have what we think is French oak in the New World, which is kind of neat. So there isn't a clear delineating line between New World and Old World. It's just a way to help you try to weed out spots and arrive at your initial or your final conclusion. So, but like Tanya, I agree. I think we're in South America. So I'm going to say 2017 Malbec Mendoza. Kathy's going further and saying Catena, which is awesome. If you can call it the brand, why not? Brian's throwing out Bernarda. Bernarda has a little more structure and tannin typically, and a little bit more darkness, some inky black earthiness, generally speaking, and that's based on a handful of tasting experiences with Bernarda, so I'm by no means an expert on that varietal, but I'm going to stick with 2017 Malbec Mendoza. Kind of also going back to one of my initial comments about the tannin, Malbec Mendoza oftentimes is a wine that I will just sip on and drink. I don't necessarily get driven to have a pairing or need the food with it. And it's that tannin profile that maybe what this is. It's blossomed beautifully. So let's see what we've got. Where we write. Oh my God, Kathy, good job. So this is a 2017 La Consulta from Catena. So you nailed it all the way through to the varietal, the region, the vintage, and the producer. That's bonus points. Well done. That's awesome. What's that?
She got it last week too.
She's just crushing it. Kathy's doing really well. Yeah, this is great. Super tasty, huh? Been producing wine for over a century there. I think they're figuring it out. Yeah, but Brian's got it from the nose. So you trust yourself sometimes and let yourself go. And Tanya's noting kind of a nice truism, which is if you don't know what it is, call it Malbec. And that's not a bad thought. This is a wine that certainly we use in the context of the restaurant where it sells itself. But also it's a nice wine that if someone likes something on the lighter end of the spectrum, they probably will enjoy this, or at least enjoy having this wine. And somebody who's looking for something structured and bigger, they can do that. So this is a great option, one to keep around. And I'm glad that we had a chance to try it tonight, and I'm glad I have a little bit left to finish it out with.
What's the ABV?
What's that?
What's the
What's
ABV?
the ABV on that? Excuse me, I wasn't looking. 13.5 by the label. So maybe a little bit more than that, maybe not. It's definitely on the margin of that. So probably every bit of 13.5 and maybe just a touch more, who knows. But it's balanced. It's, as we pointed out, it's really put together beautifully. So the tannins are well integrated. We have a nice usage of oak. The acidity is a little bit bright and fresh. And we have a nice moderate alcohol to go with all of this. And thank you, Leslie. I'm glad you're enjoying it. But you can continue doing it going forward. The price point on this was $25 for the low price of $25. Everybody is drinking and enjoying this wine. So cheers, everyone. We'll see you next week.